Welcome to the Emerge Collaborative podcast. I'm Falon.
And I'm Rachel.
Together, we share more than 2 decades of experience working with young adults on college campuses.
So on this podcast, we're engaging the questions we hear in our ministry to better equip those who care for the emerging adults in their lives. Gus Peterson has an MDiv and a Master's in Dispute Resolution. He has worked with college students and on college campuses for over a decade and specializes in conflict resolution practices within families. Gus, welcome.
Thank you. Hi, Rachel. Hi, Falon.
It's so glad you're here.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
So you spend pretty much all of your time thinking about conflict and disagreement and how to engage in conflict resolution in a way that is productive and good for everybody. We're wondering if we could start with your specialty. Like, why is it that disagreement within families is so emotionally charged? What's going on there?
I'm just going right for it.
Yeah, I was hoping to.
Okay.
Let's dive in.
Was there another way you wanted to start?
I mean, that's a really broad question. The spectrum of family groups and family systems is so dynamic and broad that it's hard to provide a simple answer. But I think it comes down to identity and formation. And when you have a group, like a family is in its own way a type of tribe. Mm-hmm. And that tribes often are drawn together because of shared beliefs and whatnot. And when you have young children and parents with, for better or for worse, a strongly held set of values or beliefs, then it's important within that family that the kids grow up learning and valuing similar things while they're all under the same roof. And again, as I'm describing this, I'm realizing that not every situation fits under what I'm already describing. There's systems and family relationships that are different than what I'm describing. But identity is a big, big thing. And for me, it comes down to it's high emotion because there's a lot of risk. Because when you disrupt a system that there's varying degrees of this, that people want to hold in harmony, then the responses to that disruption can feel like identity is being threatened by one or both groups involved. And when identity is threatened, it's no longer talking about a thing that's on a table that everybody's sort of looking at and feeling objective about how they're looking at it. Being like, that cup of coffee, that's like 6 inches tall and it looks like it's a hot cup of coffee. Like and we can talk about that coffee and we can maybe brainstorm what's inside of that cup, whatever. But family, it's hard to talk about closely held beliefs in a similar way. It's no longer something out in front of you, it's something within you. So when you challenge that, or as parents, I think when you have a sense that that's being challenged, it's very hard to, I almost want to say dissociate or put back to an objective position this thing that we're talking about. And I think that's where emotions get high and things are said that people might regret and that there's an environment that might no longer feel safe to talk about the thing in a way that might have felt safe like a year ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Yeah. When a 7-year-old asks about heaven, it's a beautiful thing. When a 17-year-old questions what you said 10 years ago about heaven, it's the same person. But what's happened in those 10 years, whether it's for the child, for the parents, for what's gone on in the church, may have informed the child differently than it informed the parents over those 10 years. And that gap makes things really precarious.
Yeah.
It's a road fraught with peril.
Yeah, and that's so challenging because we know that part of what is really important developmentally in the adolescent years is that separation from the parental units as an individual becomes more of an individual and discovers who they are. That process in the adolescent years can be really challenging, and rebellion is a part of that, developmentally normal and even necessary. And that can set some really bad habits of ways of relating and communicating that can extend into the years that a child is then in college and is emerging into adulthood. Can you put some language to what some of those bad habits are of the ways we relate and communicate with each other, particularly in that relationship of adolescent to parent or young adult to their parents?
Some bad habits? I think the word that pops to mind is assumptions. Those developmental steps along the way where I think young adults, kids learn this very early on. They're paying attention and they're basically asking the question, am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? Over and over and over again. And you sort of learn what things are safe and what things aren't safe depending on how the parents or the community respond to that. So, and then what becomes safe and unsafe are the things that are discussed or not discussed. And this often happens really without even thinking about it, right? I have an 11-year-old and a 7-year-old, and I have said to my kids when they ask a question, I'm like, oh, that's a great question. Can we talk about it later? And I might be communicating that. If I don't follow up or if they don't follow up, I may accidentally be communicating I'm not willing to talk about that, even though I might be busy making them lunch or something. So it can be as subtle as that, what kids learn about what's on the table and what's not on the table.
Yeah.
And then it just becomes kind of encoded, and that takes place more broadly in faith communities and in whatever other tribes we self-select into. There can be safe things and there can be sort of things that aren't safe to talk about.
What do you think the dynamic looks like when a teen who's starting to really ask those questions of like, how do I become my own person? How do I begin to separate a little bit from the tribe, if you will, from the family unit? And again, a way that's healthy and developmentally appropriate. What does it look like when an adolescent starts to wade into some of those topics that were previously off limits? And how can parents respond in a way that sets them up for success when their teen becomes a young adult and goes to college and wants to have even more challenging conversations or wants their young adult to feel safe coming to them, even if it's going to be something challenging to talk about?
I think for every system, it's different. I think that's a great question. I would love to. I'm not perfect in that as a parent, but I think trust and prioritizing long-term relationship are really key things for parents. And I also think it's never too late. But if you can cultivate habits of what conflict looks like early on between you and your spouse, you and your partner as parents, I think that can do nothing but good. My wife and I agreed early on, and this has been really hard, that if we get into conflict in front of our kids, we're going to apologize and begin the sort of reconciliation from that in front of our kids. Because the damage gets done if you disagree in front of your kids but reconcile in private. Then they're always on like the season-ending cliffhanger, day in, day out. Is this ever going to resolve? And it's deeply unsettling. I would also encourage parents. This is one of those it's never too late things to listen, like listen without judgment and listen with genuine curiosity. Try to, as best you can, experience it as. And it's really hard. Like put it on the table. It experiences it as a thing that you're curious about. That, and you echo then your child, your student's curiosity, because what they're really asking continually is, am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? Like there's a book, Getting to Yes, about negotiation. Rachel, you've probably read this. Talks about position-based versus interest-based negotiation. I think parents, and this isn't a perfect metaphor, but parents can often get in a place of position-based. In our family, we believe this. And how dare you do this? And you're really digging your heels in on a principle. But if you're paying attention to the interests, what you might stumble into is that the deeply held values, like a broad value of like humanity made in the image of God, the beauty of humanity, right? That might inform several things that might sort of go on divergent paths later on. Where, the 17-year-old, 21-year-old, whatever, is bringing to you like, hey, I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about this. If you listen for the shared interests between the two of you, you're not listening to respond. You're listening for the values that are held, that you can have a deeper conversation. And that's going to, hopefully, and again, I've said it before, I'll say it again, every system's very different. I think I'm trying to be careful not to just in broad strokes enter into this, but I don't think you can go wrong by listening with curiosity, listening with a non-judgmental ear as a parent, particularly right now.
Yeah, that's really good. We talked a little bit about adolescent development. We know that sociologically, the emerging adult years are characterized by identity exploration as well as young adults continue to try to separate themselves, figure out who they are, ask the question of who am I? And that includes navigating a lot of really core beliefs, especially when it comes to politics and faith, religion. What do I believe about God? What do I believe about how we relate to each other? What advice would you give to a college student who wants to be honest about their views with their parents, but is afraid of disappointing or upsetting them or causing a rift in the family relationship?
Big question. And I asked that question myself when I was in college, and I ultimately wasn't in a place where I could really ask it. But first of all, I think if someone approached me with that question, I would have a lot of questions for them initially. I would just, it's basically conflict coaching. It's like you just come along, instead of mediating with two people, you come alongside one person and hear their perspective on the conflict. And then you offer them some insights and some tools to just kind of move forward. To some students, I would say don't. Don't consider what the cost might be on the other side of that, not just to you, but to the broader system, but primarily to the student. Like, is it worth it? I would ask them what's motivating them to share their views at this time. Is it a fully formed view, or is it more of like a curiosity? Is it more of that kind of like rebellious challenge? I would want to get a sense of like, where are you coming from here? And then what is motivating like that fear of parents or that fear of disappointing them? And might get to some deeper things that really reveal what is it about that relationship that is causing the hesitation here. And then depending on that, we could really hopefully come up with a game plan for a conversation. But also I would want to ask, like, who's in your corner? Because sometimes when an emerging adult has something that they want to bring in front of their parents, it can be kind of just a moment and a really dearly held thing that the student has thought a lot about what they want to share and how they want to share it to their parents, and their parents don't see it coming at all. And so the parents aren't necessarily prepared, and the student might not be thinking about that. So that part of it is going to be, that part of the conflict coaching would really be like, I'm going to ask you to take your parents' perspective for a little bit, and how can we kind of frame this in a way that can show the value of relationship, can introduce this through the lens of shared values, and then get to a point of like, maybe even saying like, I don't want this to be just a conversation today. I want this to be an ongoing thing. I want you to ask me questions so that the communicated values aren't just a position that the student might be carrying, but how are they carrying that? How are they communicating that? And what do they want after that? Most college students aren't necessarily thinking beyond that. And parents are often caught so off guard that they respond with a position and very quickly communicate to their student, this isn't safe. And it exacerbates loneliness. It can make it much worse before it has any hope of getting better. So it's it's a precious situation to be invited into, to coach someone through that. And the answers can be all over the spectrum. It can be a tiny thing, and they're just nervous about, mom and dad disagreeing for the first time in their life. And that can be a really beautiful, kind of simple moment. For the student, might feel like a ton. And then just kind of disarming that and walking through it. And for some students, family for their whole life hasn't been safe. And they've known this about themselves for a long time, whatever it is, whatever curiosity they might have or whatever they might hold close to their identity or hold as part of their identity. And they get the sense that their parents might know as well, but they've just never said it out loud.
Yeah.
And that's very precious, but not insurmountable. And then those very few sort of contexts where I'd just say like, this sounds really unsafe. It sounds like maybe we shouldn't, I don't want to offer solutions to people, but it sounds like alongside considering a conversation, maybe we should consider some boundaries.
Yeah.
And how you might want to communicate some boundaries instead of opening up a dialogue.
That's really interesting.
And then go on what they choose, right? Like respecting the agency in that. Being a coach, not someone who makes decisions for them is a key part of it.
Right. A couple of things I hear behind what you're saying is there are times when it might be really good to have those conversations first with a mentor, with like a trusted adult that is not part of your family unit. Because so often those relationships that have the most history are oftentimes, that means that there's a lot of layers to them, which makes them beautiful and rich and complex and wonderful and complicated, and there's baggage, and every time you have a conversation there are other conversations behind it that are a part of it, spoken or unspoken, and so mentorship being maybe one way of helping navigate those conversations. And then another thing I was hearing, you didn't use this language, but this idea of like emotional intelligence. And sometimes a college student who is wrestling with some of these core ideas sometimes is stepping into those conversations with more emotional intelligence than their parents are. And that's a major flip of the script that can add another layer of complexity and in some cases pain to a challenging conversation and a challenging family dynamic. And so sometimes that calls for really careful navigation, and sometimes that calls for really intentional boundary setting and a host of other responses.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think one of the dynamics that tends to happen with college students, and especially early on in the college years, is there's so much mental and emotional energy spent gearing up to launch the college student, right? It's like that whole summer. And I'd imagine a lot of spoken and unspoken dynamics going on where maybe a parent is grieving, but they wouldn't be able to name that or wouldn't feel comfortable naming it. And then they're responding to their, teen moving into young adult in really odd ways that the young adult doesn't understand. And then they launch to college, and there's this idea of like, oh, phew, we did it. And then Thanksgiving break hits, and Christmas break hits, and summer break hits. And suddenly the young adult that we've spent so much emotional energy gearing up to launch has returned to the launch pad for a little bit. And so I think in my work with college students, and I know in both of yours, we've encountered a lot of stories from college students, particularly after Christmas break, when they come back and things can get pretty intense over breaks when they're home, because that's not really prepared for in the same way on either party's end. And so I'm wondering if you could speak to that a little bit. Like how can college students and parents prepare for a meaningful time together that hopefully is peaceful, but at minimum is not fraught with so much anxiety and conflict that the college student comes back and tells all of us how bad it went?
I think there's part of it. Like, I love that question because I think there's part of it that just is going to be bad.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody,
especially that very first
we
break.
can name that.
Yeah.
The first year.
Everybody knows that it's going to be awful.
Not the families.
And hard.
We know as university life professionals, but I don't think families
And I
know
think,
that.
well, I think families have heard from other families that it's been hard. Like at some point, if we're all honest, like, yeah, that was really hard. And from students, like they've heard from other students that it's really hard. And so I think the one of the main things I would recommend is like stop making assumptions. Stop putting an unrealistic hope that this is going to be just like it was in June.
Right.
or in August before they left,
Yep.
or whatever, September, I don't know. Or if you transfer in January. I don't know. I want to include everybody here.
Whatever.
Or if you're on a quarter system. Anyways, forget it. But I think those unmet expectations can be devastating. So there's part of me that wants to be Pollyanna-ish and be like, okay, well, after, when your student graduates from high school and at some point during that summer, like, have a talk with each other, like have a realistic conversation about like, you're going to be back for Thanksgiving or Christmas or both. What do you want that to look like? Let's set up a framework. And then you can revisit that framework. And then when it happens, then at least you've given yourself a framework that both groups agreed to. And that's Pollyanna-ish because that assumes like a level of self-awareness, mindfulness, emotional intelligence from both groups, a willingness to be like, to admit that it might not be awesome. But that's not realistic to expect that every family can have that conversation. So what's the advice I have for both parents and for that student or students? Find other parents who've been through that before. Ask them how they navigated it and what they wish they would have done differently. And learn from your friends. Learn from the people that you trust. And listen. Like, really listen to those parents. Don't listen with an ear of like, oh, my family's different. And, like, being prepared to respond. Listen to what they say. And then take that advice aboard. And if you've like, really worked hard to launch your student, when they come home, let them still be launched.
Yeah.
That's got to be the most disorienting thing as a parent. I have not been through that. That's got to be so strange. And I would encourage all parents to approach that student being under your roof again, not as a jarring disappointment in how they kind of grew up without you for a few months and the sort of existential threat of that, but approach that with loving curiosity of like, ooh, help me understand. That's a phrase I haven't heard you use before. Where'd you learn that? What does that mean? Wow. Okay, tell me about that class. It's a whole different thing than like, why the heck did you say that? We don't say that in our family. Get out of here. Right? Like, there's two significant extremes, but loving curiosity, like, and let them be launched. And for and I think that's really hard for the student side of it because you go home and you want to just be home and you want to hang out with your old friends and you want to do the home things. And you're also different. Yeah. So those home things don't feel the same. And you might not have the self-awareness to be taking all that aboard. And so home begins to feel, it might feel better for worse, but inevitably it'll feel different. And different is unsettling. So for that student, I would say, like, while you're at home, talk with other friends that you made from college and ask them what they're going through at home. Like have those notes to compare with your friends and the people that you trust. And also do the best you can to still be launched and also understand, like, your family's a system and you've played a role in creating the system and it's not all going to change because you've changed. And so maybe pick your battles.
Yeah. Yep.
And it depends on the circumstance. But for the student to just learn to, like, that's a fundamental shift in the tectonic plates of development. That first time you go home and it's different. The first time I came home from college, my mom had put my dog to sleep. Gosh. And I was like, where's my dog? She's like, oh, I was scared to tell you. So, like, and I just came home to do laundry. And I was like, okay. And I think my mom at that time really, like, our relationship, I think, has come a long way since then. But that popped to mind as like, oh my gosh, home is super different right now. Like, things have moved on. And it turned out like it had only been a month and the dog had gotten sick and there were really good and humane reasons why she made that choice. She just knew that I was away at college and she was trying to give me the freedom to be launched. Yeah. And I didn't tell her I was coming home to do laundry. Yeah. So we kind of just like, and it was hard. And I didn't have the wherewithal at that time to be like, oh, I understand your humane reasons for making this decision and not communicating it to me.
Sure.
I was just like, screw this.
Yeah.
Right.
You're
yeah.
awful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we got through it, and we still have a relationship. And,
Yeah.
right? That wasn't the end of the story.
Yeah.
I think that's also like a beautiful part of Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever it is. It's not the end of the story.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Yeah.
define everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let it suck and find the moments that are awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And hold all that and learn from it and grow.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. That's so good. I'm so sorry about your dog.
I'm so sorry I brought that up. I was
No.
like, instant buzzkill.
No, but I
Rest in peace, Seymour. I love you.
Seymour. This podcast is dedicated to Seymour.
R.I.P.
R.I.P. Seymour. Yeah, but that's such a
Why am I laughing?
it's a normal human response.
Pretty funny.
What I was gonna say though is that actually is such a tangible example though of wow, things are different right now. And I think a lot of times when students come home, they feel that it's different.
Yeah.
But there's rarely that clear moment of like, oh, my pet is not here anymore. Or like,
Right.
oh, like no one actually changes their kid's room into a sewing room. Like that doesn't happen. And so it's like usually you'll go home and your childhood bedroom is the same. But something feels off. And I feel like that's sometimes harder for
Totally.
students to name. It would almost be easier if their room was changed into a sewing room because they could point to it.
Right.
They get to sleep on the couch.
Right, exactly. And they'd be like, wow, this is terrible.
I
And then
really
they'd
am
be like
launched.
that. Yeah, exactly. But it is more confusing when things are tangibly similar, but something just feels different.
I remember when I was in my first year of college and I was coming back from my longest break, and I was not very far from my hometown when I was in college. So I would go back for weekends or even for the day occasionally. I didn't do that very often, but I remember my first long break, pretty sure it was winter break. And I remember when I was leaving and I was telling my parents very intentionally, I can't wait to go home. And I meant to go back to college. And in hindsight, I was trying to communicate like I'm different. And there's something about that where like I feel more like myself now in this new place that I am launched to. And now I can also empathize with my parents who were probably deeply hurt by that statement. I don't remember their particular reactions to it in the moment. But I imagine that was pretty hurtful for me to be like, this other place is more my home now than being here with you. And I empathize with my, my young adult self too, where I was trying to communicate and articulate the ways in which I was changing and how context reflected that back to me. And how much I wanted that. And so I empathize with both my younger self and my parents in that situation where I was, repeatedly saying, I can't wait to go back home. I can't wait to go back home. And referring to this new place I was launching to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that's like the evolution of the am I safe, and the terms we use to identify that.
Yeah.
Right? Like home can be a shifting thing.
Yeah.
But to parents that has meaning, and as we grow, as students grow up, like that meaning shifts. It's crazy. And if we're not talking about it, then those assumptions can be painful.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Even into adulthood, that continues to
Yeah.
remain a tension point. I mean,
No, it's all over in college. And then
yeah.
everything's fine.
Right. Actually, you graduate and then suddenly there's never conflict at Christmas. It's great, you guys. That was sarcasm. Yeah, I'm wondering, we've talked a lot about holding the tension between the student experience, the parent experience, the reality that they're launched and they come back, all of those things. Sometimes that does kind of swirl together to create really heated moments, whether that's at Christmas or whether that's the day that the parents drop their student off at college or a phone call. What should students and parents do when a family gathering or a conversation turns into a heated argument? Like I'm thinking about political differences that show up around the dinner table, especially after a college student has launched and maybe come home and has brought home laundry and new ideas, and maybe a new political identity, or maybe new ideas about faith, or they've gone to a completely different church than where they grew up, or like I can think of a million things that they're going to bring home with them.
I can also think about ways in which ordinary, minuscule things can turn into heated arguments in these major moments of transition. Like bringing home the laundry might be the major point of contention. Like, I just laundried you and you expect me to do your laundry now? Or I can think of college students who've shared stories of different ideas of what curfew looks like after coming home from college for the holidays or something like that. So even minuscule things, their whole range of things, from very important core identity topics to kind of minuscule, mundane interactions, that all of which can turn into kind of these heated arguments. Yeah, what do we do when we're in the midst of it?
Great question.
Thank you. You are a conflict coach, so I'm hoping you can solve
You're
it.
an expert. You never get into conflict, right?
No, never. I think in broad strokes, conflict, and especially like high conflict, when voices are raised, something is tapped into identity, which has caused us to like trigger into almost a survival instinct, whether that's on the parent side or the student side. There's a threat involved, and we're lashing out to quash the threat, and that's never going to get anybody anywhere. There's actually a guy named Jefferson Fisher who's a lawyer in the South, and he has a book he just put out, but also these really easy to digest little reels about how to engage conflict, how to engage aggressive people. They're these little 30-second bits, and they're full of wisdom. And he's got little bits on like de-escalation and whatnot that are, I think, beautiful sound bites of how to approach sometimes stuff like this. Don't match the energy. Whether you're a parent or a student, just don't match the energy. If they're looking for a response from you, if they come at you, blah, 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 that's a terrible, we don't do that, you will stop. Then just pause. Like, let the silence take over the room. And what happens in that silence is kind of a natural breath that you're giving the conversation that almost invites subliminally and very clearly the person who just spoke to have those words echo back to them without you saying them. And it also lets you, not that it's all about control, but I think in that situation what you're trying to model is some self-control. Even though you might want to respond because things are escalated, it gives you a chance to take a deep breath. And a deep breath is always a good reset. And you can evaluate and you can look around the room and just name it. Right? Like, and this takes practice, but just say something like, well, this is weird. That's awkward. This is strange. I've never heard you say that before. And you're not matching that tone, but you're rather expressing what's happening in the room. And if the parent or the uncle or whatever is responding and continues the aggression, then I think it's okay to say, hey, and this takes a lot of practice, but it's okay to say, you can affirm what's going on in the room. You can say, it seems to me you're pretty fired up about this. I'd love to talk to you about it when there's less of this energy in the room. Can we talk about it at a later time when we've both had a chance to kind of figure this out? And disarming those heated conversations, it's oversimplifying it. It takes a lot of practice, but being willing to give it the space, like just give silence. It's so easy in those environments to just like, bah, 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 bah. Especially in family systems. Some of them are like wired and thrive on this kind of conflict. But giving it that silence, naming what's going on in in the room. This is weird. This is awkward. This is strange. I've never experienced this before. Home feels a little different right now. Takes it down to you owning what you're feeling and then asking for permission to talk about that in a less heated way. And if that's not respected, then I think you can give yourself permission to say, okay, I just need to leave the room right now. This doesn't feel okay.
Yeah.
And that might be fraught with its own peril. They might keep coming at you. They might say, get out of this house. It's risky. The stakes are high. And if you know right away it's not safe to respond, then make that decision for yourself. Like, don't respond at all.
Yeah.
Then debrief it later with a safe person.
I really enjoy helping students navigate learning the attachment styles that they learned when they were in their family systems. They oftentimes can't realize that until they leave for college and they see how other people interact in other family systems, and they get exposed to different kinds of personalities, or watching how those attachment styles play out with their roommate or a significant other or something like that. And they begin to put more language to how they have learned to have conflict through their family systems, and then make decisions about what they want to keep and what they want to shed from those patterns and habits as they move forward in other relationships, and also in their relationships with their siblings and their parents and their aunts and uncles and their grandparents and whoever else might be in their household and in their orbit. And that's just a really important part of the growth that happens in the young adult years. And I always really admire students who are willing to kind of face that, because it takes a lot of self-awareness, and it comes with a lot of growing pains. In particular, I think, to notice the ways that you were formed through conflict and in conflict in your family systems, and how that translates into other relationships.
And I would say, like, I think it's a healthy realization, wherever we're at on the spectrum, to realize, like, mostly, broadly speaking, conflict is just inevitable. And if we can mitigate conflict by just leaning into it early on, we probably will have less of those explosive moments. And some family systems, as we realize and reckon with those, don't allow a lot of space for that. And every student does kind of grow into their own understanding of what that might look like for them. But I think the sooner we can get to that place of, like, wow, a conflict just keeps popping up. How am I going to handle this? It's good to constantly be evaluating, reevaluating, and practicing.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, we've focused a lot on the perspective of the college student, which is good. We should. I'm wondering, on the flip side, what would you say to a parent who's feeling maybe grieved? Or I would use the word threatened, but I think that's not maybe a word that a parent would use automatically, but it, like you said, kind of going back to earlier, threatening of identity, threatening of the family system, what have you. But I think that shows up in grief. They feel disconnected. They feel sad, or like they're a young adult. Sometimes I get the impression that parents are like, oh, I want my young adult to launch successfully. And then they do, and they're like, oh gosh, just kidding. Or like, oh gosh, not like that. Or like, oh, suddenly this is out of my control. What would you say to a parent who's feeling concerned, grieved, alarmed by differing views that their child now has because they're at college, changing perspectives on various ideas, or even to a parent whose child is starting to challenge family systems or family dynamics in a way that feels super threatening or uncomfortable?
I think it's important that you name grief in that, because grief is its own process. I think the emotionally mature response that I know, having experienced grief, not in this way, is you learn in grief that like the person for whom you're carrying the grief, for lack of a better way to put it, you don't put your grief on them. And putting your grief on them magnifies your grief and their grief, and their emotional burden. It's like concentric circles. It's an onion, you peel back the layers. you go outside. Like, who is that first circle that you go to outside, and who is your circle that you can talk to about how that feels? I think that's an important thing that parents should consider in that grief. And I don't think I've mentioned this yet, but I think an important part of that, if grief is involved, like, consider counseling. Consider counseling, because what we're addressing here is the self-work of parents as they go through that transition. That, for better or for worse, this is an emerging adult who's an autonomous being who's going to make their decisions based on the structure that they grew up in and the choices that they're now beginning to make. And that's just going to happen. And it's, in a lot of ways, well, it's not about the parent. And that can be a big thing to unpack as a parent. How much of your identity have you enmeshed with your child?
Yeah.
I know that I'm probably guilty of that. And that will be a hard thing for me to unpack when my kids launch. And I'll have some feelings maybe about choices that they make. So take time for yourselves as parents to not put how you're feeling about how different your student is on them. Put it on other people that you trust, and maybe include a counselor or a therapist in that, is a primary aspect of that. And then I think alongside that, practice listening without judgment. Practice curiosity, and check yourself when you have those moments where your college student says something that's outrageous to you. Check your poker face and practice some phrases of like, oh, that's a lot for me to process right now. Or so, I don't know, something like that. Of like, that's interesting. I never thought about that before. Right? Some sort of neutral phrases so that even in those little subtle moments, you're not putting something on them that shouldn't be on them. Because they're carrying enough. They're carrying enough trying to navigate those initial stages of just being an adult. And what they want, and what I think you want as a parent, is that long-term relationship. You want to be invested and involved. And you want them to know that you're safe, and you want them to ask you the big questions. You might not agree on them. That's okay. I hope it's okay. Get to a point where it's okay.
Yeah, I hear in there, avoid reacting and instead have some prepared statements so that it gives you space to respond well when you're in a place that you can do that. And I love that you brought up grief, Rachel, because it reminds me too of, we've been talking a lot about anger, and oftentimes in family systems, when a button is pushed and no one knows how to push our buttons better than the people closest to us, it often comes out as anger, but anger is always a secondary emotion. So what is that primary emotion? Is it anxiety? Is it alarm? Is it grief? What is the threat there that is informing that anger? And if we can give ourselves a little space when we feel that anger bubbling up to allow ourselves to look inward and see what's behind that anger, what's informing that anger, what's making the anger come out, then we can respond to that primary emotion, that primary experience as we're interacting with the people we love most in the world, and respond really well and with love instead of with anger.
And especially when there's so much that's modeled around us that is quick to respond. I think that can be it's becoming like a countercultural thing to practice taking those little spaces to have thoughtful responses. And will those responses be heard? I don't know, but I believe that it's worth practicing.
Yeah. This was such a great conversation, Gus. Really rich with wisdom and practical tips of how to navigate challenging situations as our relationships with our parents on one end and our young adults, our emerging adults on the other end, as those begin to change. So thank you so much for sharing with us. And sounds like we all need a conflict coach now. So
Yeah.
Go for it.
Gus,
Come to me.
I was actually going to say, Gus, if there are families, parents out there who feel like they're struggling to navigate family conflict or dynamics and could use someone like an outside person to come in and do some coaching or even some mediating, how can they find you?
They can, I will soon have a website, guspeterson.com. And in the meantime, I have a very clever Gmail address, which is guswillgetbacktoyousoon@gmail.com. Which
That's
is true.
fantastic.
I will get back to you soon. If you email me there, I'd be happy to take a conversation forward.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much.
thanks, guys.
My pleasure. Thank you.